7 March 1945, 3:25 in the afternoon, the west bank of the Rhine River at Remagen, Germany. The air smells of wet stone and smoke. Artillery echoes from distant hills. A cold wind moves across the river, brushing the surface into restless ripples. On the heights above the town, American tanks crawl forward, their engines grinding low and steady. Lieutenant Karl Peters of the German Army stands near the demolition switch inside the eastern tower of the Ludendorff Bridge. His gloves are damp. He has checked the wires 3 times already. The order is clear. When American forces approach, the bridge must fall. Across the river, Sergeant Alexander Drabik of the United States Army moves carefully along a shattered road. He is 24 years old. He has marched through France and Belgium. He has crossed smaller rivers under fire. But this is the Rhine. For generations, it has marked the edge of Germany itself. In his mind, the river is wide, final, almost symbolic. He does not expect to see a bridge still standing. The Ludendorff Bridge rises from the water like a dark rib cage. Steel trusses cut across the gray sky. Smoke drifts around its towers. For months, Allied bombers have tried to destroy crossings like this. Most are already in ruins. Yet here it stands, scarred but intact. A forward scout shouts and points. Officers lift binoculars. There's confusion, then disbelief. Captain William Bradge of the 9th Armored Division lowers his glasses slowly. The bridge is still there, not broken, not fallen, usable. For a moment, time seems to pause. Inside the eastern tower, Lieutenant Peters hears the rumble of approaching armor. He knows what must happen. He waits for confirmation from his superior. The line crackles with static. Orders come late and incomplete. The defense around Remagen has been shattered by days of pressure. Units are scattered. Ammunition is low. Some soldiers are barely trained replacements. Finally, the command is given. Destroy the bridge. Peters nods to the engineer beside him. The detonator is activated. A thunderous explosion splits the afternoon. Flames burst along the span. Concrete chips fly outward. A section of the roadway lifts into the air. Sergeant Drabik hits the ground as debris rains down. Smoke swallows the structure. Then the smoke thins. The bridge still stands. A jagged hole gapes in the deck. Cables hang loose, but the main trusses remain locked in place. The charges, weakened by earlier bombing and rushed preparation, have failed to cut the vital supports. The Rhine continues to flow beneath steel that refuses to surrender. American officers stare in disbelief. Someone shouts, "Move!" The decision forms almost instantly. There is no time for caution. If the Germans attempt another demolition, the opportunity will vanish. Captain Bratch turns to his men. His voice is steady but urgent. "Take that bridge." Sergeant Drabik feels his heart pound against his ribs. The Rhine lies ahead, wide and cold. The bridge could collapse at any second. Enemy machine guns are already opening fire from the far bank. Bullets snap against steel. You can imagine standing there, the choice between waiting for safety or running into uncertainty. History sometimes moves in seconds. Drabik does not wait. He sprints forward with the first assault squad. Boots strike broken pavement. Smoke burns his throat. The damaged planks tremble beneath each step. Behind him, tanks roll closer, their cannons firing toward the eastern bank to suppress German positions. Halfway across, another explosion shakes the structure. German engineers have triggered smaller charges. Sections of railing fall into the river. A steel beam groans. Men dive for cover behind twisted girders. One soldier, Private Joseph Delicio, scrambles to pull a wounded comrade toward a patch of relative safety. The wind carries the smell of cordite and burning wood. On the eastern side, Lieutenant Peters watches in horror. The bridge was supposed to fall. It was supposed to buy time. Instead, American soldiers are racing across it. He knows what this means. The Rhine was the last great natural barrier before the heart of Germany. If the enemy establishes a foothold here, the war will change pace. Drabik reaches the far end. He and a handful of men leap into shallow trenches near the tower. Grenades arc through the air. German defenders retreat into nearby buildings, stunned by the speed of the assault. Within minutes, more American troops flood onto the span. Engineers follow close behind, searching desperately for unexploded charges. They cut wires with shaking hands. Some explosives are found still live, hidden beneath debris. Above them, the bridge creaks under strain. Chunks of concrete crumble into the Rhine. By early evening, the Stars and Stripes is raised on the eastern bank. The Ludendorff Bridge, battered and wounded, remains standing. The river that had marked a boundary for centuries has been crossed in a single, reckless rush. And the world does not yet understand what has just happened. Night settles over Remagen like a heavy curtain. The fires still burn along the riverbank, casting uneven light against the steel skeleton of the Ludendorff Bridge. It groans at intervals, a long metallic complaint that makes every man on it glance upward. Sergeant Alexander Drabik lies flat behind a low stone wall on the eastern side. His breath fogs in the cold air. The adrenaline that carried him across the span has begun to fade, replaced by a deep, trembling awareness of where he is. Beyond this ridge lies the interior of Germany. Behind him, the bridge remains crowded. Engineers from the United States Army move quickly with flashlights covered in red cloth. Captain Carl Henny, an engineer officer with sharp eyes and a steady voice, kneels beside a tangle of wires near the base of the eastern tower. He brushes away dust with careful fingers. Live charges. The earlier explosion had failed to cut the main supports, but more explosives had been placed deeper within the structure. Some are connected, some are not. The wiring is sloppy in places, hurried. In others, it is methodical and deliberate. Henny calls for cutters. His men work in silence, aware that one mistake could finish what the first blast did not. Above them, German artillery begins to adjust its aim. The first shell lands short, sending a column of water high into the air beside the bridge. The second strikes the western bank. The third hits the span itself. Steel shudders. Dust rains down. Soldiers flatten against the deck. Private Joseph Delizio grips the side of a twisted beam. He looks down through a crack in the roadway and sees the dark water far below. It moves with slow certainty, indifferent to the war overhead. By midnight, more American units have crossed. Tanks edge carefully over the damaged deck, one at a time, their weight testing every bolt and rivet. Each crossing feels like a gamble. Lieutenant Peters, now under arrest by his own superiors for the failed demolition, is escorted away under guard. The German High Command demands explanations. The Rhine was to be a final shield. Instead, a gap has opened. In the early hours of 8 March, the shelling intensifies. German gunners fire from the hills east of Remagen. Rockets streak through the sky. The bridge is struck again and again. Chunks of masonry fall from the towers. Smoke wraps around the trusses. Drabick helps move ammunition crates toward a shallow defensive line. He catches sight of civilians in the distance, moving cautiously through the ruined streets. War has reached their doorsteps in full force. You can feel the tension in every movement. Every footstep on the bridge could be the last before it gives way. Engineers continue their work under fire. They discover a massive charge embedded near one of the piers, its fuse damaged but not fully disabled. Henny makes the decision himself. He crawls forward, shielding the fuse with his body as another shell explodes nearby. With deliberate precision, he cuts the final connection. The bridge survives another hour. By daylight, word has spread through Allied headquarters. A crossing over the Rhine has been secured at Remagen. The news moves quickly up the chain of command. General Omar Bradley recognizes the scale of the opportunity. Reinforcements are redirected, supplies are rushed forward. What began as a chance encounter has become a strategic breakthrough. On the eastern bank, American units push outward, expanding the bridgehead. Small villages fall in quick succession. Resistance varies. Some German units fight stubbornly, others withdraw in confusion, their lines fractured by surprise. Drabick and his squad move through a wooded slope overlooking the river. The ground is muddy and slick. The sound of artillery echoes without pause. He pauses behind a tree, listening to the distant rumble of tanks crossing behind him. The bridge continues to take punishment. At one point, a direct hit tears a hole through the deck. Traffic halts. Engineers rush forward with planks and steel plates, patching damage with whatever materials they can find. No one speaks of retreat. By 10 March, thousands of American troops have crossed into the bridgehead. The once isolated foothold has grown into a solid presence east of the Rhine. German counterattacks fail to push them back. Still, the bridge weakens. Every blast leaves new cracks in the concrete piers. Steel beams bend slightly under cumulative stress. Soldiers who cross glance upward, aware that the structure is living on borrowed time. On the afternoon of 17 March, a loud crack echoes across the river. Witnesses describe a sudden sag in the center span. Engineers shout warnings. Traffic is halted. Then, with a deep metallic roar, the Ludendorff Bridge collapses into the Rhine. Steel twists and plunges into the water. Towers crumble. A cloud of dust rises into the sky. Dozens of engineers working on reinforcement are lost in the collapse. The cost is heavy. The river swallows what remains of the structure. But by then, it no longer matters in the way it once would have. Pontoon bridges already stretch across the Rhine nearby. Ferries move steadily back and forth. The bridgehead is secure. The crossing that was never supposed to happen has already changed the map. Sergeant Drabick stands on the eastern bank and watches the last fragments disappear beneath the current. The bridge that refused to fall has finally done so, yet the path into Germany remains wide open. The Rhine keeps moving, as if nothing unusual has happened. Steel lies broken beneath its surface, hidden by dark water and drifting debris. Smoke thins over Remagen. The towers that once guarded the Ludendorff Bridge stand like hollow shells against a pale March sky. Sergeant Alexander Drabick does not cheer when the bridge collapses. He simply watches. The sound of twisting metal still echoes in his ears. 17. March 1945. Late afternoon. The crossing that changed everything is gone, but the damage from a military standpoint has already been done. In the 10 days before the collapse, more than 20,000 American soldiers had crossed into the bridgehead. Tanks, artillery pieces, trucks filled with fuel and ammunition had rolled east. Engineers had laid pontoon bridges downstream, strong and steady. The foothold on the far side of the Rhine was no longer fragile. It was firm. In a command post miles away, General Dwight Eisenhower studies updated maps. Thick blue lines that once marked the Rhine as a barrier are now crossed by arrows pointing deep into Germany. The unexpected seizure at Remagen has accelerated plans that once seemed distant. To the north, other Allied formations prepare their own river assaults. To the south, additional crossings are organized. The psychological barrier has been broken. The Rhine is no longer untouchable. Drabeck moves with his unit toward the hills beyond Remagen. The land is rolling and cold. Farms sit quiet under gray clouds. In some villages, white sheets hang from windows. In others, resistance still flares from hidden positions. He thinks about the sprint across the bridge days earlier, the smoke, the uncertainty, the sound of boots on damaged steel. It feels both recent and distant, like a dream recalled at dawn. Private Joseph Delizio walks beside him, helmet pushed low against the wind. They speak little, words seem unnecessary. In the weeks that follow, the Allied advance gathers speed. The Remagen bridgehead links with other crossings. German defenses begin to fragment under constant pressure. Rail lines are cut, supply routes collapse. On one cold morning near the town of Bad Honnef, Drabeck pauses at the edge of a ridge. From there, he can see columns of vehicles moving along a road below, heading east in steady formation. The war in Western Europe is entering its final phase. Back in Remagen, civilians clear rubble from streets that have seen too much. The shattered towers of the Ludendorff Bridge remain as silent witnesses. Children walk past them on their way to fetch water. The river flows past broken stone without judgment. News of the crossing spreads across the United States. Newspapers print images of American troops standing on the eastern bank of the Rhine. For families back home, the name Remagen becomes a symbol that the end may be near. Yet for the men on the ground, the war continues 1 mile at a time. In late March, Allied forces encircle the Ruhr industrial region. Thousands of German troops are cut off. The collapse of organized resistance in the west begins to accelerate. Each movement traces back, in part, to that moment when demolition charges failed and a decision was made in seconds. The Ludendorff Bridge had been built during the First World War as a strategic rail crossing. It was designed to move men and machines toward conflict. Decades later, it became the stage for a final act in another war. It did not fall when ordered. Lieutenant Karl Peters, whose failed detonation set events in motion, faces a grim fate under his own command structure. His story is a reminder that war punishes hesitation, even when circumstances are chaotic and resources are thin. Drabeck survives the campaign. Years later, when asked about Remagen, he does not describe heroics. He speaks of confusion, of running because others were running, of a bridge that looked as if it might collapse at any moment. You might expect history to hinge on grand design, on long meetings and perfect planning. Sometimes it hinges on a damaged wire, on an explosion that is not strong enough, on a captain who decides to move forward instead of waiting. By April, Allied armies press toward the Elbe River. In the east, Soviet forces drive toward Berlin. The war in Europe draws to a close. The ruins of the Ludendorff Bridge remain long after the guns fall silent. In time, only the stone towers stand, preserved as a memorial. Visitors walk through them, reading plaques that describe the events of March 1945. They look out over the Rhine and imagine the smoke, the noise, the risk. The bridge that refused to fall did not survive the month. Yet its brief defiance reshaped the final chapter of the war in Europe. It shortened timelines. It disrupted plans. It proved that even in a conflict measured in millions of lives, a single structure can alter momentum. On that afternoon in early March, when smoke cleared and steel still spanned the water, the path into the heart of Germany opened faster than anyone expected. The river kept flowing. History moved with it.